fluid was low. Like a week before her due date, they did the ultrasound and my fluid was low. So they induced me a couple days later or something like that. And so then I was in the hospital for like 4 days contracting, not the entire time, but most of it. And I could have gone home at one point, but I was just like, I just want to be, I guess I felt like if I stayed in the hospital, it would just happen quicker.
Yeah.
It didn't. So then the final like inducement thing, they did that. And then it was like another 12 hours before I was dilated, and then another something, I don't know, it seemed to last forever. And then the pushing went for 4 friggin' hours, and I thought I was gonna die.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, I kicked all my family members out. My sister and friend Tracy, cousin-in-law Tracy, they were in there. The plan was for them to be in there with me, and it was just like after an hour and a half, I was just like, no, okay, everybody out. I just need the nurses and the doctor. I can't do it anymore. Just get out.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I remember curling into the nurse's arms at one point, just saying, please make it stop. I told myself I wouldn't say the words, I can't do it. Because obviously you have to do it, right? Yeah. But I do remember thinking, she just wouldn't move. And I just remember thinking, it felt like the peak of the pain. And I thought, there's no time to get me to the OR. There's no time. Like, she's going to have to cut me open right here. And then they used the vacuum on her head, but they couldn't get suction because she had too much hair.
Oh, really?
And so then they used the forceps, and I thought I was going to die.
Oh.
Yeah, I thought I was going to die.
I can't imagine that.
But then she's out, and she's in your arms. You're like, oh.
Yeah.
Everything is forgotten in like a split second.
It's crazy, isn't it? And then you feel like Wonder Woman.
Yeah. Well, then that's another thing. I told myself I wasn't going to take the epidural or anything like that. I was going to go natural. Mm-hmm. Frig that. Not a chance. So during the 4 days of like pre-labor when I was in the hospital, the contractions were so bad. I asked, like, they gave me a little tiny bit of morphine. I only took like, I think 2 doses. And after that, it seemed to level out. So I didn't want any extra at all. And then I got the epidural. Like, as soon as the real contractions started, I was like, oh my God. And because it was 12 hours in the delivery room before the pushing even started, I had so much epidural that by the time things were cleared out, she was over on the warming table. I had to get up and, go use the washroom and have a bath. I couldn't walk. I was like completely numb and wobbly and like I was drunk. Yeah, it was funny.
Yeah.
I couldn't get out of the bathtub. It's so funny to think about now. Oh my. I won't get into details, but it was pretty funny.
We'll save that for another episode.
I just keep thinking about any man who's listening. But if they have kids, maybe they've all experienced it. Who knows?
Yeah.
Peripherally.
Yeah, and there's that too, like in the, I remember after we had Avery, and you have so many hormones running through you that you're an emotional mess anyway. Mm-hmm. But like they had asked us, the nurse had asked us about whether we wanted him in the room with us or if we wanted some time to sleep, and they would have him down at the nurse's station. Right. And I said, no, I want him here. And you have that kind of guilt, like, well, it's my baby. Like, I'm supposed to be taking care of it. Yeah. I can't have somebody looking after it already. Yeah. And then I struggled with breastfeeding, as I'm sure everybody does.
I did too, yeah.
And there's that guilt, like, it's supposed to be natural, and it's supposed to be normal, and it's supposed to be, like, just a beautiful natural thing
with this hazy light around you.
Yes, and it was awful.
Yeah.
And then people would come to visit, and I was an emotional wreck because I couldn't get them to breastfeed. And then, like, people would get angry because they couldn't come see him, and I'm like, I can't deal with you right now.
Yeah, yeah.
And then you feel guilty about that, but I mean, eventually, after 2 weeks, it was fine.
Yeah.
But God.
Autumn latched on right away, but, and I couldn't admit it to myself at the time, but after a couple of months, like I just didn't have enough milk for her, you know, and I had I literally, it wasn't even that I was consciously in denial of it. Like I just didn't know. My brain just shut that awareness off, you know, for some reason. But anyways, you know, it turns out she's all right.
That too. Like, I've heard people say, like, when I automatically chose to breastfeed, like that was just something that I wanted to do.
It is a beautiful thing.
Yeah.
Like, I mean, it is
but if
something special.
You can't, or if you choose not to, they shouldn't make you feel bad about that.
No.
And you shouldn't feel bad about that. You shouldn't, like, there shouldn't be a right and wrong.
No. And they say, you know, like, it's good if you can breastfeed for the first 3 months because you get all the, you know, immune enzymes, whatever it is that they need from you and stuff. But to hear that, well, what if you don't? Do they get no immune system?
Right.
Like, you know, it kind of puts fear into you.
Yeah. And I support, like, I mean, breastfeeding is great.
Yeah.
And it's
But if it's not for you, or if for some reason the baby won't take, or you don't have the milk, like, that's okay. Yeah. I remember, oh my gosh, this is heartbreaking. Beautifully kind of heartbreaking. I remember these certain particular times that she was tiny and looked up at me and smiled.
Yeah.
One time it was when she had a really bad, I think maybe it was a sinus infection or a really bad cold, and there was really nothing we could do for her, right? And I took her into the bathroom. I just turned on all the hot water as high as I could, closed the door, and the bathroom's really little, so it steamed up really quickly. And I took her in there, and I was just rubbing her sinuses, and she just looked up at me with this little like, oh, thanks, mommy. Aww. Like, it was just her whole face melted into this beautiful little relaxed smile, like she had relief for the first time in ages. The other time was the first time I gave her formula. And she drank, I don't know, however much of the bottle, and looked up at me, and I knew that it was the first time her belly had actually been full.
Oh, really?
You know what I mean? And I was like, oh my God, baby, I'm so sorry.
Yeah.
But she was just like, ah. And it was the sweetest thing.
Yeah.
It was the sweetest thing. But I mean, like, she was almost 3 months old at that point when I finally kind of like, and it's so weird because it literally hadn't occurred to me.
Yeah.
You know, that formula should be an option.
Yeah.
I had started pumping by that point, so she was getting enough.
Yeah.
She wasn't losing weight, but she was gaining weight really slowly. And actually her dad did express some concern, but he and I weren't communicating well at the time, and I was in denial, so I really kind of pushed him away in that regard. And I mean, not even intentionally, just like instinctually. Like I I didn't even have this emotional choice but to shut him out, right?
Yeah.
And I probably shouldn't have, because he had a really good point. However, she survived, so but yeah, that moment when she smiled up at me and I realized, oh my God, your belly is full for like one of the first times in your poor little life. And she didn't care. She was just happy it was full.
Well, yeah, and like when Kirby was little and she was waking up every 2 hours to eat, and I was exhausted. And when I was pregnant with Avery, I could feel my wisdom teeth coming in.
Oh.
And
fun.
But they weren't bothering me enough to do anything about it. And then they didn't bother me at all after I had him. And then when I was pregnant with her, I noticed that they were bothering me again. And the dentist said, you're going to have to get these removed because they're growing in sideways, not up.
Oh,
so
ouch.
they're not going to go anywhere. It's just going to keep bothering me. And I went to the dentist sometime after she was born, and they said that I would have to stop breastfeeding because I'd be sedated and the drugs wouldn't be good for her.
Right.
So I had to make a decision at that point, and that was when I realized that I was suffering from postpartum depression, and I was the whole mom guilt thing where like, no, I wanted to breastfeed until 12 months and I have to do this and this is the best thing for her. And I was feeling so emotional about it, but Alex, like, I was trying to pump and nothing was coming because I was exhausted. Mm-hmm. And he was offering to get up in the middle of the night and feed her. So then we decided to do like half and half, like half formula, mm-hmm. half breastfeeding. Yeah. And it was like my whole world opened up because I was able to get sleep at night. Yeah. And he was able to get up with her and spend that time with her in the middle of the night. Yeah. And then I could get my wisdom teeth out. So after that point, I just stopped breastfeeding. Yeah. And, I mean, bottles can be a pain in the ass. It's so much easier to breastfeed because you don't have to warm up anything. True. And you don't have to mix anything. And
yeah, but it's not like it takes a whole lot of work
to mix it up. It was fine, but yeah, it made such a difference. And to think of all the emotion that I went through to make that decision, it's stupid.
It's natural though. You know, like I remember, so I was, I was still pumping and she was breastfeeding, but really rarely. And so I had some bags of milk in the freezer. And so she was probably about half and half that she was getting. And my friend Mona was home. She doesn't live here in Amherst, but she was home for a little bit. And it was wintertime and the power went out. And she came over just after the power had come back on, Mona did. And Autumn, I think, was with her dad at that moment, or maybe napping or something. But Mona came over and I was dumping out the milk that had been in the freezer because it had all, thawed and it was no good anymore. Right. And she looked at me and I didn't say anything. And I was actually okay, but she looked at me and she's like, "Is this a sadness cleaning?" And I was like, actually, and then I started to get teary. I was like, actually, this is the last of my breast milk. I think it's all over now. It's all... And then it was like, oh, thank goodness I don't have to do that anymore. Because pumping is a pain in the ass. As much as it's kind of a pain to like mix up the formula, pumping is a whole other job in itself. It is, yeah. You can't do anything.
Like going back to the group of women that I was part of, I was the only Canadian.
Oh, wow.
Everybody except for one lives in the States. The other one lives in England.
Yeah.
And they all go back to work. Some of them were lucky enough to have 6 weeks off or maybe 2 months.
Right, yeah.
But most of them went back after 2-4 weeks.
Can you imagine?
Like they still weren't healed from giving birth and they'd be back at work. So and they'd be at work pumping and sitting in the bathroom stall pumping and using hand pumps because they had nowhere to plug it into. Crazy. And I'm just like, I am so thankful that we live somewhere that we can have a whole year off if we want to.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. No, we're very lucky in that way. Not lucky, fortunate.
Yeah. Yeah. I couldn't imagine. And my sister did it. My sister pumped for a whole year. I'm just like, wow. No. That takes a lot of dedication.
A lot of dedication. It's so much work and it's exhausting.
It is.
It's weird. I remember too when I first got pregnant, I couldn't believe how tired I was right off the bat. And I remember thinking, oh, right, you're making a body inside, like you're making a human. So of course all of your resources are going to that and not to your brain and not to the rest of your body. And I remember, because before I would have thought, well, you get tired once you start to get big because you're carrying this extra 30 pounds around or whatever. Yeah. But no, it's not.
Your body's constantly working.
Yeah. And hungry, right off the bat. I thought I was such a wuss too, because I went off work at 5 months. And that's early. Like a lot of people, they'll teach right up to 2 weeks or a week before they go into labor. But I think the job I had, it was a wonderful place, wonderful people, all that stuff, but I was understimulated. And so I think I got bored at work. So I got really tired and I just couldn't pull myself around. Mm-hmm. So then I feel guilty about that. I felt terribly guilty about going off work so early, but I couldn't do it. I would be like, I couldn't. I was falling asleep at work and I couldn't keep myself awake. Yeah. If I was doing something else, perhaps it would have been different. But no. So I felt guilty about going off work so early. I felt like a wuss.
I know. Yeah. With Avery, I was in a term position, so it had ended in March. He was born in April, so I had a month off, and same thing. You feel guilty because you're sitting around doing nothing. And I'm like, I should be doing everything. And there are women who are they feel completely fine up until the day they give birth. And I was not one of those women.
Me neither. I wasn't even completely fine just sitting.
No.
I was so uncomfortable.